What happens when the country's top safety prospect, a player on every Power 5 program's radar, has his future taken from him in an instant? Damon Wade was only a junior in high school and already had his pick of the litter when it came to where he'd play at the next level. Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan, just about every program in the nation wanted him and believed they needed him. Recruiters would pitch championships, playing time, a colorful campus culture, but Damon didn't care about any of that. Growing up in the quiet streets of Encino, in a house his late father had built with his own 2 hands, he'd watch his mother struggle to make ends meet. Working 2 jobs, coming home every night exhausted, only to get a few hours rest before it was back to the next shift. Also, Damon and his little sister Maya could have the life she believed they deserved. So no, Damon didn't care about championships or personal glory. His only goal? Maximize his NIL potential. His mother had sacrificed everything so he could have the best trainers, 7-on-7 camps, everything that made him the player he is today. And football was his ticket to give it all back. By junior year, Damon was everything recruiters said he'd be. At 6'1", 200 pounds, he was the prototypical safety. He had the speed to run with any receiver and the physicality to punish any ball carrier. His phone never stopped buzzing, and his mailbox stayed full. Then, one night after a game, he came through the front door and stopped dead in his tracks. A man he didn't recognize was sitting in the living room across from his mother. At first, Damon thought he was interrupting some sort of awkward date, but what came next was equally as shocking. The man stood up, came over to him, and extended a firm handshake.
Damon, Coach Jeff Singleton, Southern Miss. It's good to meet you, young man.
Damon looked at his mother confused as she gave him a small nod of assurance. He looked back at the coach, still trying to work out what a coach from Southern Miss was doing in his living room.
Let me address the elephant in the room. What's some coach from Southern Miss doing all the way out here in your living room, recruiting one of the best safeties in the country?
Well, honestly, because I've been around the block a few times, and I've been watching you long enough to know you're more than just a football player. Look, I'm not going to pitch you championships or promise you things I can't deliver, but I've been lucky in this gig and I've made some real connections over the years. I'm sure the name Marcus Knox rings a bell.
Damon's expression shifted and he perked up slightly.
His organization backs young defensive talent like yourself. You know, the next generation. I know him personally, and Southern Miss is on his radar this year. That's a real opportunity, and as of tonight, I'm offering you a full athletic scholarship to the University of Southern Mississippi. Not because I need a safety, but because I think you're worth betting on.
The room went quiet for a moment. Damon appreciated everything about how this man carried himself. He was honest and not performing like every other coach he'd spoken to. He almost didn't even sound like a coach at all. But appreciation isn't enough to put his future on. He had Alabama. He had Ohio State, programs that would put him in front of the entire country on day one, with NIL infrastructure already in place. Coach Singleton and Southern Miss, as genuine as they are, just don't compare. He thanked Coach for making the trip and for believing in him, but the answer was no. Singleton nodded in understanding, like he knew this was a long shot to begin with. He said his goodbyes to the family, shook Damon's hand one more time, and walked out the door. Currently listed as the #1 safety prospect in the nation, junior year was all about generating interest, and Damon was doing exactly that. The following week, he got the Encino Renegades rolling early, sitting patiently back in his zone, letting the play develop before his instincts took over. He broke on the ball, snatched the interception clean out of the air, and his elite level speed did the rest.
What a play by Wade! That's a Renegade touchdown!
It was shaping up to be another electric outing, until late in the third quarter, stepping up in the box to stop the run, Damon threw his body toward the ball carrier.
Oh no, Wade is down!
What we're looking at is a multi-ligament tear. With an injury like this, you can expect a lengthy recovery process. Surgery and rehab will help restore function, but there will be permanent limitations.
In the blink of an eye, the future everyone had been certain about vanished. Over the next several months, Damon watched his team fill his spot. The buzz around him faded from loud to quiet to nothing at all. And the offers, the ones that had been stacking up all year, disappeared one after another. Football was moving on without him, but Damon wasn't ready to let it go. He pushed his mother to take him to doctor after doctor, convinced that somewhere out there, one of them would give him the answer that he needed. But they all said the same thing, until eventually he stopped trying to force it. He stopped showing up to team workouts and stopped coming around altogether. Being near the team, near football, was just a reminder of the future that no longer existed. Damon Wade was no longer a football player, but that didn't stop the bills from coming. Rehab, follow-up visits, specialist consultations, the medical costs had been stacking up for months, and they weren't stopping. His mother was already stretched thin, and he couldn't just sit there and watch it happen. Football might not be the answer anymore, but that didn't mean he couldn't do something. So the summer before senior year, Damon made a decision. It was time to get a real job, a grown-up career, something with purpose. Welcome to Canyon Burger, the best beef on the block. Can I take your order? Okay, look, it wasn't exactly a six-figure salary, but it was something. So Damon flipped burgers, worked the drive-thru, and watched his classmates and former teammates pull up to the window, laughing and telling him to put the fries in the bag. But Damon held his tongue and, well, put the fries in the bag. This was his life now. Wake up, go to school, clock in for a shift or for rehab, and repeat. One night after his shift, Damon came home to an empty house. His mom and Maya were at a gymnastics practice, and he was looking forward to the peace and quiet. He kicked back, booted up some CFB 27, but didn't feel like spending real money to upgrade his player in Road to Glory. So he pulled out his phone and started scrolling. He scrolled for an hour until he landed on an old highlight clip of himself from junior year, before everything happened. He almost scrolled right past it, but instead, he watched the whole thing. He went to bed that night without ever leaving his room or speaking a word to anyone. Inside him, something had shifted.
Damon Wade, the consensus #1 safety in the country, is moments away from making his decision. Wherever this kid lands, he changes that program immediately. Damon Wade will be committing to...
When he woke up, something felt different, like he needed to escape the meaningless loop he'd been living in. And that afternoon, instead of heading to rehab, he found himself stopping by practice for the team he'd walked away from months ago. And standing on the sidelines, watching his guys work through the drills, he felt something stirring in his chest. Turns out, he wasn't ready to close this chapter, not like he thought he was. So he did the work, got cleared by his doctors, and convinced his mom that this was something he needed. And by the time the season rolled around, Damon Wade was back in the secondary for the Renegades. Only this time, he was starting from rock bottom. And his first game back made that painfully clear to everyone watching. This wasn't the same Damon Wade that had lit up the national recruiting scene a year ago. He was smaller, slower, and struggling to find a rhythm that had once come so naturally to him. And when contact came, his hesitation was visible, a split second of self-preservation. Ball carriers rolled over him, and his instincts, sharp as they were, couldn't make up for a body that was lagging behind. There was no delicate way to put it, he was straight up a liability out there. And needless to say, no schools were looking at him. It was a tough pill to swallow, but thankfully, Damon was still a beast in the classroom. The following week, with Encino hosting the Stockton Orcas, Damon gave himself one simple goal: make just one play. It didn't have to be pretty or even impressive, just something he could point to. Well, that something didn't come right away, as the Orcas slot receiver ran straight past him on the first series for a Stockton touchdown. And that's when the reality of his situation truly set in. He couldn't play the way he used to. He couldn't bait deep balls with speed he no longer had, and he couldn't count on being the most physically dominant player on the field. Not anymore. In a lot of ways, it felt like he was learning the position all over again from the very beginning. So he went back to basics. Later in the game, coming downhill, he stayed low, wrapped up the ball carrier, and kept his legs churning for a sound, textbook tackle. It was nothing highlight worthy, but nothing to be ashamed of either. And late in the fourth quarter, with Stockton threatening deep, Damon spotted the route, knew he couldn't jump for the interception, and instead played the man. And with some help from his corner, the two forced the incompletion together. Encino held on for the win, and even though it wasn't the game-wrecking performance Damon had built his reputation on, it was something. Something that might just be enough to land on someone's radar. Except over the next week, his phone didn't ring a single time. Homecoming came and went, and Damon wasn't exactly in a partying mood. He could feel the season slipping through his fingers, and part of him still believed he could just will his body back to what it used to be. But no matter how hard he pushed himself, his legs always lagged just a half a step behind. After another quiet performance against the Mustangs, quiet except for the times he got torched deep, he knew that waiting around for someone to notice him wasn't a strategy he could rely on anymore. With 0 offers to his name, even his own coaches were trying to let him down easy. But Damon wasn't ready to give up just yet. He still had numbers in his phone from a year ago. He pulled up Coach Smart's contact from Georgia, typed out a message, and hit send before he could second guess it. He knew it was a long shot, a shout into the void, but the night before his next game, his phone buzzed. It was Coach Smart. He was willing to give him a second look. No guarantees, no promises, just an opportunity, and that was all Damon needed. Taking the field against Harbor City the next evening, Damon felt the weight of the moment like never before. He'd played in front of dozens of scouts over his career, but something about this one, knowing what was riding on it, felt heavier than all of them combined. On the opening drive, he stepped up in the box on 3rd down, shut down the ball carrier, and got his defense off the field. A solid start, but nowhere near enough. The next series, the ball went to the far side of the field, and Damon got flattened by a tight end he never saw coming. Yeah, let's hope the scout didn't see that one. His teammate came up with a pick six on the following possession, and the sideline erupted, but Damon didn't join in the celebration. He needed a play like that for himself, and he wasn't going to relax until it came. In the third quarter, down 3, he sniffed out the run early and raced downhill to wrap up the back for a 1-yard gain. Then he came right back on the very next play to close fast on a quick pass and force third down. He was slowly building something play by play, and he could feel it. But the more he tried to force the big moment, the more his technique started to unravel. He began hunting hits instead of making plays, and Harbor City could see it, and they were content to keep running straight at him for the rest of the game. By the final whistle, Damon knew what he had done, even if part of him wanted to believe he had shown enough. He waited days for Coach Smart's response, and when it finally came, it hit him harder than the first diagnosis. Georgia was out of the equation entirely. They'd moved on and found another safety to offer, a guy that just a year ago, Damon ran circles around. Senior night came and went, a night that was supposed to mark the beginning of the next chapter, but it ended up feeling like a farewell to football altogether. Standing on the field one last time, what hurt the most wasn't the thought of failing himself, it was the thought of his family and the promises he'd made to them. How could he make a difference now?
Welcome to Canyon Burger, the best beef on the block. Can I take your order?
While his former teammates were flooding Instagram with commitment posts and signing day announcements, Damon was doing what he did best. I guess on the bright side, he'd been promoted to drive-thru supervisor, a change that came with a whopping 75-cent raise. So yeah, things weren't exactly trending in the right direction. And the same meaningless loop he had fought so hard to escape had found him once again. Until one evening, a voice came through the drive-thru speaker that stopped him cold.
Sure, let me get a number 3, easy on the onions, with the Coke, please.
There was something about this voice, and Damon couldn't place it right away. But when the car pulled up to the window, he suddenly felt a wave of embarrassment. Coach Singleton?
Damon, good to see you, son. How you been?
Living the dream, as you can see.
I heard about last year. I'm sorry that happened to you, but I also heard you fought your way back onto that field. And I want you to know, that alone means something.
Damon, struggling now to make eye contact, got a little quieter. Yeah, I guess so.
Look, I'll be straight with you. Your mother told me I could find you here.
Those words got Damon's attention. My mom?
Yeah, and I came because I wanted you to hear it directly from me. Southern Miss is still on the table, Damon. It always was.
Damon just looked at him for a moment, with no idea what to say. Are you joking with me right now?
I think it'd be pretty messed up if I was.
Look, I appreciate it, Coach, truly, but I don't know. I put my mom in a bad spot with the bills and all, and I think I need to just stick around here and do what I can to help. Coach Singleton looked at him with the same steady expression he'd had in the living room a year ago.
I understand that, more than you know. Look, freshman camp doesn't start for a few more weeks. Just think about it. That's all I'm asking. Now give me my burger.
When Damon got home that night, his head was all over the place, and when he walked through the door, what he saw stopped him cold. A single Southern Miss hat sitting alone on the dining room table with a chair pulled out right behind it. He stood there for a moment trying to make sense of what he was seeing, and when his mom appeared from around the corner cheering, it clicked. She had recreated the hat ceremony he never got to have. Damon stood there taking it in, genuinely moved by what she'd done, but when he told her he turned Coach Singleton down, that he was choosing to stay, the cheering quickly stopped.
I didn't raise you to run a drive-thru, baby.
Damon went to bed that night with her words sitting heavy on his mind, and when he woke up the next morning, something had shifted. Canyon Burger wasn't the answer. It was never going to be. No amount of shifts was ever going to move the needle for his family the way football could. His future looked different than he'd planned, but it was still his future. So Damon Wade traded the headset for a Southern Miss hat and began the long journey to Hattiesburg, Mississippi.
Southern Miss football is in a heap of trouble. We're talking about a program that's only finished above 500 once in the last 8 years. Just a year ago, they finished 1-11, dead last in the conference. Golden Eagle football needs more than a culture change. It needs a miracle.
When Damon arrived in Hattiesburg for the first time, nothing about it felt like home. No traffic, no city noise, just quiet that would definitely take some getting used to. And the further he wandered around campus, the more the reality started setting in. Achieving any kind of NIL recognition all the way out here was going to be a different animal entirely. Damon was beginning his freshman year at a 64 overall with a long way to go before even thinking about signing any sort of deal. But here he was, and when he was meeting up with Coach Singleton for the first time, that wasn't in his living room or through a drive-through window, he was keeping his word. In his first practice, he was getting the chance to move up the depth chart. But Damon was being thrown straight into the fire. He still couldn't make cuts the way he used to, and when he planted his feet to make contact, ball carriers were running right through his face. A few guys on the sideline laughed, and others shook their heads. But Damon blocked out the noise, and when it came to team drills, he played discipline and coverage and even cleaned up his tackling to end the day. And by the final whistle, he had done just enough to slide up the depth chart. It was a small win, but he'd take it. And afterwards, Damon was able to land a small part-time gig at a convenience store just outside campus. Something to bring in a little extra cash while he worked on getting his NIL situation off the ground. It wasn't much, but he was sending whatever he could back home. But that came with its own set of problems. Damon's teammates quickly noticed he wasn't sticking around after practices, and anytime he chose his shift over the team, that tension only grew. When the season finally kicked off, the Golden Eagles hit the road to face West Virginia. Not exactly the softest opener, but Damon wasn't looking for anything easy. He wanted to make an early statement, but West Virginia had other plans. The Mountaineers moved down the field like Southern Miss wasn't even there. Damon was struggling to get off blocks, and whenever he did get free, backs were simply shrugging off his tackles. Coach Singleton tried to be supportive, but Damon didn't want to hear it. As he watched the offense take the field, he replayed his mistakes over and over. The doubt began to grow. Maybe he fooled himself believing he could recapture his former glory. Maybe coming all the way out here was a mistake. And when he got back out there, things only got worse. In man coverage, he couldn't close the gap quick enough, and the quarterback lofted an easy touchdown right over his head. Then on the very next series, covering the same receiver, he just wasn't fast enough to recover, and before he could blink, Damon had let up 2 touchdowns in his college debut. Coach Singleton stood on the sideline and didn't say a word, and when Damon came over, he wouldn't even look him in the eye. And somehow, that stung more than the 2 touchdowns did. Something needed to change. So coming out of the break, Damon stopped thinking and just started playing. He sat in his zone, let the play come to him, and trusted his instincts for the first time all afternoon. He jumped the route over the middle and picked the ball clean out of the air. And for a second, just a second, he felt like himself again. The offense quickly capitalized, cut the deficit to 4, and the sideline came alive. But before Damon could really get rolling, West Virginia took control and pulled away. Southern Miss dropped the season opener, and in the locker room after the game, the silence was heavy. It was fair to say this loss was on him, and to a locker room that already didn't trust him, it only confirmed what most of them already believed. So in week 2 against Tulane, Damon came out with something to prove. He opened the game stepping up in the box to bring down the back for a short gain, and for a stretch, the Golden Eagle defense moved like a complete unit. And when they got off the field on 3rd down, Coach loved every bit of it. But things didn't stay that way. Tulane started figuring things out, and once they pulled out a trick play that caught the entire defense off guard, they were in the end zone again to take a 13-0 lead. Southern Miss's offense struggled to respond, and Damon knew something had to give. He stepped up for another clutch tackle to force a punt, and then came out again, instantly dropping the back on a pass out of the backfield, forcing another change of possession. He wasn't making the kind of plays that would go viral by morning, but he was doing his job. With under 2 minutes left and Southern Miss trailing by 6, Damon watched from the sideline as the offense took the field and marched the length of the field before putting one in the end zone to take the lead with 30 seconds on the clock. Southern Miss held on, scraping out a razor-thin 1-point victory, their first of the season. It wasn't pretty, but 1-1 sounds a whole lot better than 0-2. The locker room afterward was livelier than the week before, but the celebration felt far away from Damon. He sat alone at his locker until Coach Singleton came over and took a seat beside him.
Quite a bit different down here than Encino, huh?
Damon just nodded without saying anything.
Look, I admire what you're still trying to do for your family. But when you moved out here, you inherited a whole new one, and they need you too. I'm going to give you another opportunity this week. Take it and do the right thing. I know you will.
Damon didn't have much to say to that, mostly because he knew his coach was right. Between school, football, and his job, he was running on fumes and it was showing up on the field. Something had to give. The next afternoon, he called the convenience store and told them he wouldn't be coming back. And for the first time in forever, he had no plan how he was going to help his family from all the way out here. All he had now was football, and he had to make it count. That week, Coach's promise came through. Damon battled his way up the depth chart and was officially the #1 safety for the Golden Eagles, just in time for their toughest test yet, number 17 ranked Memphis. Damon opened the game with a solid tackle and helped his defense get off the field early, and for a moment, it felt like something was building. Until an entirely new problem reared its head. The Golden Eagles offense was lifeless. What looked promising at the start ended in a 41-0 blowout that left Damon and the whole team in shambles. Damon and the defense had done everything they could do to hold the line, but when your offense can't move the ball, what can you really do? Later that week, trying to shake it off, Damon ran into a girl he recognized from back home, from the same high school, and somehow she was at Southern Miss too. He lit up, finally, someone from his world. Turns out she remembered him too, just not from the football field. Yeah, so things weren't exactly trending upward. The following week, Southern Miss fell to Western Michigan, where the offense managed to put up 10 points and then called it a day. Then against South Alabama, Damon got his hands on another interception, his second of the season. And for a moment, everything came together. Technique, discipline, even his legs, all working together in unison. A statement play from the former 5-star right out of the gate. But on the sideline, Damon watched the offense do absolutely nothing with it. He went back out there, made tackles, created plays, but it all amounted to nothing. The Golden Eagles dropped their third consecutive game, and it was the same story, just a different week. And with no wins came no recognition, and with no recognition came no NIL opportunity. But that didn't stop Damon from trying to take matters into his own hands. He shot some promo for a local spot called Oscar's Pizza, the only business in Hattiesburg that showed any interest. But the only thing he got out of that was some free pizza for the team, which, silver lining, made them like him a little more, so there's that, I guess. And every time he called home, he couldn't help but feel like he was failing. His mom kept telling him everything was fine and not to worry, but when he spoke with his sister, he knew things were far worse than he could have imagined. Maya had gotten the mail one day and found something official looking that she couldn't make sense of. But Damon could. His stomach dropped as he read through the letter. The home he grew up in, the one his father had built, was just months away from being taken from them. The entire week during practice, he struggled to stay focused, because the truth is, he was angry. He knew his mom had been keeping this from him on purpose, scared that if he found out, he'd be back in Encino before the end of the week. Then one afternoon, Coach Singleton found Damon alone in the film room, with something heavier than football clearly on his mind. When Coach approached him and rested a hand on his shoulder, Damon broke. He told him everything, about the house, his mom, and the notice they'd received. Coach Singleton listened without interrupting, and when Damon was finished, he just sat there for a moment.
How much time does she have?
Damon gave him the rough timeline, a few months at most. Coach Singleton nodded again and said,
You can't save that house from this room, Damon, but you can still save your future. Go out there tomorrow and make them notice you.
Coach stood up, patted him again on the shoulder, and walked out. Damon sat there a little longer, not exactly feeling better, but different. Something had shifted. He didn't know how he was going to do it, but he knew what he had to do. Make enough noise in Hattiesburg that the rest of the world had no choice but to listen. 8 weeks, $20,000 to scrape together, all from a program nobody outside of Mississippi was even talking about. When Damon took the field against App State, the mission was clear. On the very first play, he read the quick pass out of the backfield, flew downhill, and blasted the running back, forcing the ball loose in the process. Southern Miss recovered, and the sideline erupted. The offense turned it into 3, and Damon was ready for another crack at the field. With the first quarter winding down and App State threatening to score, he keyed on the option and blew up the pitch, forcing another fumble that the defense recovered. All of a sudden, for the first time in a long time, Damon Wade looked like himself out there. But as he'd grown accustomed to, the offense struggled to keep up. But today, that didn't faze him. He kept flying around the field, kept his unit locked in, and kept generating stops. Then, late in the third quarter, he'd put his stamp on the game. Sitting deep in coverage, he read the quarterback's eyes, cut off the route, and snagged the ball right out of the air for his third takeaway of the afternoon. Damon was a monster on the field that day. Even though by the final whistle, the offense had managed just 2 field goals and lost the game, he knew he had made some real noise in college football. Sure enough, he'd won Sun Belt Defensive Player of the Week, a small spotlight, but a real one. The first time his name had been attached to anything positive since he stepped foot in Mississippi. Shortly after, NIL offers started trickling in. Nothing market-shattering, but more than he'd seen at any one time since arriving. It still wasn't enough to save the house, but it was a start. At 1-5, Southern Miss wasn't playing for anything. No championship, no bowl game, nothing at all. Which meant if Damon was going to get noticed, he was going to have to make it happen all on his own. Week by week, he kept putting together tape. The NIL deals were small and slow moving, but they were coming in. He scraped together what he could, but he knew it still wasn't enough. And by week 11, he was still $8,000 short. And against Louisiana, he got his best opportunity yet. He read the quarterback's eyes, broke at the last possible second, and strong-armed the ball away from the receiver for the interception. Yet another highlight play. He was officially leading the Sun Belt in picks, and that alone started generating some attention. It wasn't much, but every bit counted. The following week against Old Dominion, Damon came through with multiple clutch tackles and pass breakups, helping Southern Miss claw their way back into the win column. And it was encouraging watching his offense finally put up some points. But later that night, back at his dorm, when adding up the numbers, he was still short. $4,000 was all that stood between him and saving the home he grew up in. And there was exactly one game left to make it happen. Against Troy in the season finale, Damon came out flying. He chased down a run that had broken free, making the touchdown-saving tackle to hold the Trojans to just 3. Then, midway through the second quarter, with 2 other defenders closing in, he flew downhill and blasted the pile, knocking the ball free. The offense kept their foot on the gas for all 4 quarters, and Southern Miss closed out the regular season with a 31-26 victory. He sat down that night and added everything up. Every NIL deal, every dollar he'd saved from Canyon Burger, every single spare penny he had. And when he was finished, he was short. Damon stared at the number for a long time. He'd given everything he had, and everything just wasn't enough. Over the next few days, the end-of-season accolades came ringing in. First team All-Sun Belt, freshman All-American, and under different circumstances, these awards would mean everything. But right now, he only felt hollow. And right then, his phone rang. It was Coach Singleton. Damon picked up, expecting to talk about next season, but what he got instead stopped him cold. Coach wasn't coming back. Following the disappointing season, the program had decided to move on, effective immediately. Just like that, the man who had sat in his living room in Encino, who had pulled through the drive-thru just to give him a shot, the man who had never stopped believing in him, was gone. He said he'd still be coaching elsewhere, but elsewhere didn't exist yet. The two said their goodbyes and hung up. First the lost season, then the lost house, and now this. Unsure of what was next, Damon packed up his room and headed home. By the time Damon got back, his mom and sister had already moved out of the house. What they had now was a small, cramped apartment, barely bigger than his dorm in Hattiesburg. His mom did her best to make it feel like home, but it never would. And late one afternoon, Damon found himself driving through his old neighborhood. Trying to come to terms with everything, he decided it was time to say goodbye. But when he slowed past the old house, there was a U-Haul in the driveway. Someone was already moving in. Damon could see a man emerging from the front door, cardboard box in hand. Then something that made him stop completely. The man lifted his head and his face was unmistakable. Coach Singleton, standing in the driveway of the Wade family home. Damon didn't move. He just sat there trying to make sense of what he was looking at. Right then, Coach Singleton looked towards the car and for a split second, the two locked eyes. But before he could say anything, Damon stepped on the gas and drove away. By the time he got back to the apartment, his mind was already made up. Southern Miss was done, and whatever Coach Singleton was to him, he was done too. His future was wide open, and he was jumping straight into the transfer portal.